Hi, dear students. Today's topic under discussion is very important. This is not only important, but this is interesting to note that speech production is gonna be the topic under discussion. In order to have knowledge about the concerned topic and the topic under debate is you need to understand 47 slides I have especially created in order to equip you, my students, with knowledge and wisdom about today's topic. Dear students, speech is basically the way how we have to communicate, how we have to make others peoples inform of our intentions and emotions. So speech is very important. So let's try to stream through the slides I have especially created. Let's get started. Welcome to today's lecture on speech production. Speech is a fundamental form of communication used by humans to convey thoughts, emotions, and information. You know, communication is basically what is being discussed between two people and among people. We use between if we are talking about two things, and we use among if we are talking about more than two people. So if there is a group of people, we can say that there is communication among the people, and if there are two people and they are talking to each other, we use the word between. So speech is basically a source of communication which is basically known as conversation and confabulation. So, producing speech involves a complex interplay of physiological, cognitive, and linguistic processes. And here, the cognitive is basically relating to the part of mental capability, and cognitive can also be known as the mental skills. So, if I talk about linguistic, this is basically the scientific study of the language. And those people who study linguistics, they are to be termed as linguists. In this lecture, we will explore the anatomy of the speech mechanism, the process of speech production, and various factors that can influence speech production, including speech disorders and multilingualism. Basically, here I want to tell to my dear students that multilingualism is basically a term which is used in linguistics. This term shows that whether an individual has command over several languages of the world. He can speak multi-language, he can speak several languages of the world, he can be termed as multilingualist. And this phenomena is known as multilingualism. Anatomy of the speech mechanism. Before we delve into the process of speech production, let's first understand the anatomy of speech mechanism. Anatomy is basically a branch of biology which deals with the external parts of the body as well as internal parts of the body. If we are dealing with the external parts of body, this can easily be termed as external anatomy. And here, if we talk about the internal parts of the body of living organisms, we directly mean that we are going to discuss the internal anatomy. So, in this lecture, we will explore the anatomy of the speech mechanism. Speech production involves the coordination of several structures with the human body. As you know, that hundreds of muscles take part in articulating the words. Basically, when we have an intention to talk to any person who is standing in front of us, if we are making calls on the mobile phone or whatever devices are being used by us, we try to speak, we try to communicate, we try to deliver our words to them. So by doing so, our orofacial muscles take part in the production of the sound. And for your kind information, there are basically 100 types of muscles which collectively play the role in in order to articulate the sound and in order to produce the sound. So collectively, this is the system of the body, the system which is placed in humans through which there is basically the production of sound. This can be termed as the vocal tract. You know, in vocal tract there are basically vocal cords. When air is released from lungs and it passes through the vocal tract, it becomes the cause of the vibrations and oscillations in the vocal cords. So through these vibrations and oscillations there takes place a sound. Respiratory system. The process of speech production begins with the respiratory system. Yes, this is the first thing through which we try to produce the sound. Whenever we do breathing, we do ventilation, we take in oxygen, and this is simply known as inhalation or inspiration. But in return, we also exhale, we do exhalation. This can be known as expiration. So when we are going to expire, we have to exhale carbon dioxide, which can symbolically be written or written in the formula shape. This is basically CO2. When it passes from the it is released from the lungs, it passes through the vocal cords. So now it depends upon the pressure of the carbon dioxide which is gonna be released from the lungs, and hence it is going to be passed through the vocal tract. This will determine the criteria of the richness of sound, the pitch of the sound, and the loudness of the sound. So air is expelled from the lungs, passing through the trachea, larynx, and vocal cords. The respiratory system plays a crucial role in providing the necessary airflow for the speech. Lungs, trachea, larynx, and vocal cords, these all things take part in the production of the sound. And larynx is basically and biologically known as a voice box, because here our air which was released from the lungs and which was passing through the vocal cords is in fact converted into the sound. That's why we are able to utter and speak the words we want to convey to our listeners. Larynx and vocal cords. The larynx, also known as the voice box, houses the vocal cords. Exactly, larynx is basically the voice box, and it is, it directs the vocal cords how to vibrate, and through the vibrations of vocal cords there is basically a produced sound, and larynx is basically the voice box which becomes the cause of the production of the sound. The vocal cords are two folds of tissues that vibrate as air passes through, producing sound. So these sounds serve as the basis for speech. Whenever you try to speak, you try to communicate, whenever you have to share your ideas with the people who are standing in front of you, you want to utter, you want to speak up. So whenever you do speaking, whenever you try to communicate, you in fact release air from your lungs and it passes through the vocal tract and becomes the cause of the oscillations and vibrations in vocal cords. So through these vocal cords and through larynx, which is simply known as voice box, we are able to produce the sound, and our listeners are able to listen what we deliver to them. Here I am going to show you a diagram which will enable you to understand the basic particles and the basic structures which take part in articulating and producing the sound. So let's take a look. Here basically this is alveolar ridge and this is nasal cavity. Sometimes we notice that if people are talking, we feel that they are talking from their nose. So basically the air pressure which passed through the vocal tract and released from the lungs, it also approaches to the nasal cavity, and we see some type of vibrations in nasal cavity. So we feel that the person to whom we are talking is talking to us through his nasal cavity. Lips, teeth, and this is basically the tip, body, tongue. This is basically tongue, and this is root and pharynx, velum, oral cavity. This is epiglottis. Epiglottis plays the role for the separation of food we eat and air we inhale. So whenever we take liquids in or whenever we take foods in, our epiglottis closes the way of our gaseous exchange, and the food or liquids we have taken directly go to our stomach through esophagus. And but in contrary, when we inhale, the air goes downward and epiglottis closes the paths of esophagus, and it directly goes to the lungs, where it is called as oxygen mixed air, which is known as oxygen gas for gaseous exchange. And our heart beats and circulates the blood to our lungs, and then when heart circulates the blood to the lungs, heart gets mixed with oxygen, and it is again through the contraction and through the relaxation of heart, the blood is pumped through aorta to the entire part of the body, and so our body can survive, and our body is able to be mixed with oxygenated blood. So this is, I want to show you that how much complex the system you have. Okay, let's discuss the next slide. Articulators. Articulators are the structures involved in shaping the speech sound. All the body parts which take part in producing the sound, which take part in basically production of the sound, they are called articulators. Articulators and production of the sound can easily be understood that the organs which are taking part in the production of the sound are called articulators, like our tongue, our alveolar ridge, our teeth, hard palate. These are basically all known as articulators. The main articulators are the tongue, lips, teeth, alveolar ridge, and hard palate. By manipulating the position of these articulators, we can create different speech sounds. Yes, this is quite right. Suppose I am your teacher and I am teaching you the topic under discussion, which is speech production. Here you have a variety of words, and every word has some different type of pronunciation, and you can easily observe the symmetry and the position of my jaws, teeth, lips, and tongue. Basically, when we suppose I'm going to pronounce the word articulators, and the main articulators are the tongue, lips, teeth, alveolar ridge, and hard palate. So here there is basically a different style to pronounce the words. So, by manipulating the position of these articulators, we can create different speech sounds. If our position for pronouncing the words or saying the words is the same, it means we are unable to identify the different voices. As you know, all words have different pronunciation. So, whenever we are going to utter the words, we speak up those words differently by changing the position, and this position actually determines that the words are being correctly pronounced. Let's take a look. Just try to go through the diagram. I have especially put it in my slides. Let's stream through. Here are basically the structures of vocal cords. Vocal cords are basically the source of the production of the sound. When our lungs are always filled with air, and air is always present in our alveoli, which are the sacs of air in our lungs. So, when air is released from lungs and it goes back to the mouth and passes through the vocal cords, it becomes the cause and the source of the oscillations and vibrations in the vocal cord. So, as you know, the vocal cords are tissue, and here you can see that there are cartilages, which are the soft bones. So, these vocal cords vibrate and these produce some type of oscillations which are peculiar and quite special, because these are basically just because of the air pressure which is released from the lungs. So if the pressure is higher, the speech will be louder comparatively. Now we have taken a look to the vocal cords. Their diagrams are quite obvious. Here the vocal cords are kept closed. Here the vocal cords are kept open. Now let's take a look. This is basically trachea, and here lies the vocal cords. This is epiglottis, and this results in the separation of liquids and solids and gaseous exchange in different ways. So these all things take part in the production of sound, and this is basically the vocal tract. I'm using the word again and again. The word is being used by me. This is basically vocal tract. So you have to keep the entire diagram in your mind, that this is basically the vocal tract. Vocal tract means how sound is produced. Okay. Let's discuss the next slide. Process of speech production. Speech production involves a series of coordinated steps. Yes, exactly. Whenever there is any activity going to be, assembled, it is always coordinated. So there is also a coordination system in our body, which is the system of nerves, which through nerves our entire body is connected. If you are walking on the grass and there you feel that some pest has stung you, and you all involuntarily put your feet aside, this is just because of the structure of neurons. So your brain, especially when there is such an accidental situation, your spinal cord actually instructs your body part to change the position, and it is just because of the nerves which are placed in the entire body, and there are also sensors in our body. So here we are going to discuss that for the production of speech there is basically a coordinated step. So let's explore each step in detail. Phonation. as it is quite obvious and clear from its name that there is some type of phone can be said as sound. So the first step in speech production is phonation. During phonation, air from the lungs passes through the vocal cords, causing them to vibrate. These vibrations create a buzzing sound, which is source of sound for speech. Resonance. The sound produced during phonation then travels through the vocal tract, which acts as a resonating chamber. Resonance may be termed as the vibrating surface or echoing. So, the size and shape of the oral and nasal cavities influence the quality of the sound. So, whenever you come to face such people who seem to be talking through their nasal cavity, we feel that there is actually a sound and there is actually a vibration in their nasal cavity. So we feel rather than pronouncing the words or communicating through their vocal tracts and through their mouth, we feel that air is actually present in the nasal cavity, and it is because of the vibration that we feel that they are talking to us uh, through their nose as well, through their nasal cavity as well. So the size and shape of the oral and nasal cavities influence the quality of the sound. Changes in resonance give rise to different speech sounds. So when if you are a singer and you are singing a beautiful song, but you will never copy the original one, because the shape and the size of oral and nasal cavities influence the quality of the sound. You have a different shape and size of the oral cavity, whereas in contrast we have dissimilar things with the people whom we are going to copy and imitate. So changes in resonance give rise to different speech sounds. Articulation. The final step in speech production is articulation. The articulators manipulate the sound produced in the vocal tract to create specific speech sounds. The tongue, lips, and other articulators move rapidly to produce a sequence of sounds that form words and sentences. Here we are going to discuss very easy, not a complex structure through which we are able to talk. So let's try to understand how do we talk. Our brain has a thought. Our lungs will fill with air to power the sound. The air pushes our vocal cords, making them vibrate. Our teeth, tongue, lips, and move to shape the sounds. So, here are basically all things which take part collectively in the production of sound. Our thought appears from our brain, and thought is basically converted to our speech. Suppose you are talking to a person and you think before you speak, and so what you think is basically a thought, and it actually gets into your conscious and unconscious parts of body. So then what happens next? Your air lungs your lungs fill with air to power the sound, and the air pushes the vocal cords as it is released from the lungs. And so the air pushes our vocal cords, making them vibrate. You all know this fact that sound is only produced when the body is vibrating. If there are not vibrations, you are unable to produce the sound. I can exemplify this phenomena by making you conscious about a drum beater. If he has drum and he has beats in his hands, and if he doesn't hits the drum surface with the beats, it means there will be no sound. So if he goes on beating the drum surface with the with his beats, so there will take place the vibrations, and these vibrations will be a cause and source of some type of sounds taking place through the surface of the drum. So the point to clear is that if there is no vibration, there will be no sound. So let's discuss the very next slide. Speech disorders and their impact on speech production. Here we can see in around us and in our surrounding that there are many people who are abnormal in speech production. They have certain problems. There are some people who can't speak up exactly and correctly, and their listeners are unable to understand what they are going to say. So such problems can be said as disorders, and we have a couple of people in our society, in the stratas of our life, that they are abnormal. They are suffering from some type of impediments in their speech. So let's discuss the speech disorders. Speech production disorders are conditions that affect an individual's ability to produce speech sounds accurately and fluently. Accurately means correctly, and fluently means consistently, with a consistent rhythm. So let's look at some common speech disorders and their impacts on speech production. Articulation disorders. Articulation disorders involve difficulties in producing specific speech sounds correctly. So if we have an articulation disorder, we will feel some type of difficulty while producing specific speech sounds correctly and accurately. Children with articulation disorders may substitute, omit, or distort speech sounds. So we can experience that the people who are, especially children, who are abnormal in their speech, we will observe that there are distorted speech sounds leading to speech that is difficult to understand. So if they have distorted speeches, their voice stumbles over, and so we will be unable to understand what they are saying. This is simply known as speech distortion, and this has always been a problem for people. Phonological disorders. Phonological disorders affect the understanding and organization of speech sounds within a language system. Children with phonological disorders may have difficulty following speech sounds and patterns, leading to speech errors that affect entire groups of sound. Phonological disorders may be understood as the problems with how the sounds are being produced. So exactly we are unable to produce the sounds if we have phonological disorders. Apraxia of speech. Apraxia of speech is a motor speech disorder that affects the ability to plan and execute the precise movements required for speech. Individuals with apraxia of speech know what they want to say but struggle to coordinate the muscle movements. You know, you observe many people around you who can deliver, uh, who can write but they cannot deliver. So they have basically problems with their speech, and apraxia is basically a problem or a speech disorder through which you confront such people who can answer the questions in written format but they are unable to explain just because of the lack of coordinations of muscles. So one thing to keep in mind is that it's quite clear from these statements that there should always be a coordination while you are going to speak or produce sound. So if there is lack of muscle movements and there is inappropriate coordination among the muscles or the orofacial muscles which are hindered while production of the sound, so you will be unable to speak up correctly. So this results in slow and effortful speech. Dysarthria is a motor speech disorder caused by weakness, paralysis, or lack of coordination in the muscles responsible for speech production. You know, uh, paralysis is basically the body part which does not receive maximum or required oxygen to itself due to some plague and due to some obstruction or blockage. So, you have also observed and you have watched many people around you who are the victim of paralysis, and their body parts which are paralyzed cannot maintain their normal functioning. They become abnormal in their functioning. So that's why if they have some type of weakness or paralysis or lack of coordination, their muscles responsible for speech production will not work effectively. So people with dysarthria may have slurred speech, difficulty controlling pitch and volume, and challenges with clear articulation. That's why they are unable to speak and articulate the words exactly. Multilingualism and its impact on speech production. Multilingualism may also affect the speech. First of all, to understand the impacts of multilingualism on speech production, you must be well familiar with the term itself. Multilingualism is basically a property or basically a knowledge. If we talk about a particular language, you speak your mother tongue, but if you have knowledge about the several languages of the world, you can be termed as multilingualist. And those people who are multilingualists, they can be termed as multilingualism. So the phenomena may be known as multilingualism if you know the many languages of the world. Multilingualism refers to the ability to speak and understand multiple languages. Yes, this is very easy definition, that multilingualism refers to the ability to speak and understand multiple languages of the world. Let's explore how multilingualism can influence speech production. Phonetic interference. When an individual learns a new language, the phonetic rules of their native language can interfere with the pronunciation of sounds. Pronunciation of sounds is basically how to sound the words. So when individuals learn a new language, the phonetic rules of their native language can interfere with the pronunciation of sounds in the target language. This may lead to accent related issues in speech production. Accent is basically the dialect or the way you talk or speak. This can also be termed as timbre, and this can also be known as dialect. You know, I have to share a fact with my dear students that your dialect goes on changing after covering the distance of 2.5 miles. If you and people around you who are at a particular distance of 2.5 miles away from you, you all have the same language, but you can easily observe the variations and changes in the way you sound the words of your language. So this can easily be known as dialect. This is basically the accent, or this is basically the way you speak up, you utter the words. So this may lead to accent related issues in speech production when you are a multilingualist. Code switching. Code switching, basically, multilingual individuals may switch between language within a single conversation. Code switching can affect the fluidity and accuracy of speech production depending on the proficiency in each language. Language dominance. Some multilingual individuals may have a dominant language in which they are more proficient. Exactly, you speak your mother language and you are much proficient in your language, but if you are a multilingual, you may be a dominant in the language that is not your mother tongue. This can influence speech production as certain sounds and speech patterns may be more pronounced in the dominant language. Speech production is the process of uttering articulated sounds or words, i.e., for example, how humans generate meaningful speech. It's a complex feedback process in which also hearing, perception, and information processing in the nervous system and the brain is involved. Speech production is very complex phenomena. Whenever you are producing speech, whenever you are talking to your listeners, you do talking also, and you also hear and listen to their remarks in return. So the voice you have heard can also be a sound energy. So when it actually enters through your pinna and then to the middle ear, where it is basically converted into a signal, and your brain receives and understands the signal, and then it converts it into sound waves, so you are able to perceive the sound. This is basically known as the sound perception and information processing in the nervous system. And so it means we can say that in speech production and listening, your brain is also involved, because your speech production starts from a thought which is generated by your brain, and whatever you listen is also heard and perceived by your brain, which is known as sound perception. So, the role of brain in the production of speech and in the perception of speech is undeniably important. Speaking in the essence, byproduct of speaking is in essence the byproduct of a necessary bodily process. The expelsion from the lungs of air charged with carbon dioxide after it has fulfilled its function in respiration. Most of the time, one breathes out silently. So, if I'm not talking, I'm I go on inhaling and exhaling, and this is basically an involuntary action. Involuntary action is an action which is not in our control. It is totally controlled by the brain. So inhalation and exhalation are basically the involuntary actions which we do involuntarily, not deliberately and intentionally. So, as you know, that it is just because of the air released from your lungs, which is basically a cause of the vibration and oscillations of vocal cords. So through these through these vibrations of vocal cords and vocal tract, we are able to produce the sound. So for the maximum time we are silent, because for the maximum time we go on sleeping and we just do inhalation and exhalation. We are not every time speaking or producing sound while inhalation and exhalation. So let's try to understand once again. Most of the time when we breathe out silently, but it is possible by contracting and relaxing the vocal tract to change the characteristics of the air expelled from the lungs. Speech production is the process by which thoughts are translated into speech. Exactly, this is thought which is from your brain, and your brain instructs your lungs how much pressure is required are to be released from the lungs, and how much pressure of air has to vibrate the vocal cords. So this is all basically through our brain. Normally, speech is created with the pulmonary pressure provided by the lungs that generates sound, or by phonation through the glottis in the larynx, that then is modified by the vocal tract into different vowels and consonants. Exactly, this is much complex, that the pressure of air which is released by lungs is basically a cause of the determination of the composition and the vibration of vocal cords. And your vocal cords, through the vibrations of vocal cords, sounds are converted and termed as vowels and consonants. And this concept of the sounds of vowels and consonants can easily enable us to understand what type of sound is being produced by us. And sounds can vary as the structure and the infrastructure and the stature of our vocal passage is quite contrary to each other. Many of us have not similarities. As you know, I can exemplify that you and your parents and your siblings have their finger pores and fingerprints and thumb impression as well, but these are totally different. Your parents have unmatched fingerprints and thumb impression, and it is quite dissimilar with your siblings as well, although you are the result of the single parents, but yet you have many dissimilarities. If we take a hair biologically, and if you take your nails, which are actually made by the keratin protein, this is basically the keratin protein which results in the formation of hair and nails. And if we try to analyze the proportion of the keratin protein which resulted in the formation of your hair and nails, it will not match with your family members, even with your parents and your siblings. So it means you are quite dissimilar to each other. It means you are the only one in the creation, and you have unique qualities as well. As far as my perception is concerned, our voices and our voice quality is also different from others, just due to the structure and texture of the vocal tract. The production of spoken language involves three major levels of processing: conceptualization, formulation, and articulation. The first is the processes of conceptualization or conceptual preparation, in which the intention to create speech links a desired concept to the particular spoken words to be expressed. First of all, if I have to answer your questions, I have to perceive, I have to conceptualize my mind, and then after doing conceptualization, my brain and my vocal cords are about to prepare for the production of sounds. So basically, we want to prepare ourselves after conceptualization for spoken. Here, the preverbal intended messages are formulated that specify the concepts to be expressed. So, it is your brain which basically formulates the messages and specifies the concept to be expressed. The second stage is formulation, in which the linguistic form required for the expression of the desired message is created. Formulation includes grammatical encoding, morphophonological encoding, and phonetic encoding. Grammatical encoding is the process of selecting the appropriate syntactic word or lemma. Basically, whenever you try to speak, whenever you try to do some type of communication and confabulation and conversation, you basically plot the sentences and words together. By adding and assembling words together, you are able to build the sentences. And by the syntactical meaning of the words or lemma, you will be able to establish the words into their sentences, and your sentences will enable you to communicate properly and appropriately the message you want to express with your listeners. The selected lemma then activates the appropriate syntactic frame for the conceptualized message. Morphophonological encoding is the process of breaking words down into syllables to be produced in over speech. The final part of the formulation stage is phonetic encoding. This involves the activation of articulatory gestures dependent on the syllables selected in the morphophonological process, creating an articulatory score as the utterance is paced together and in order of the movement of the vocal apparatus is completed. So here I have to tell you and I have to make you conscious about two technical things. Let's try to understand. You must be fully concentrated and fully tuned. Here I just pronounce the word that this involves the activation. So this was basically the activation, and here in the same sentence this was pronounced by me as the morpho. So here I said this word which is grammatically the. I said this word as the, and here I pronounced it as the. So the activation and the morpho. The technical point is that when article or the is placed before a vowel which is basically a. So whenever the is placed before a vowel sound, it is pronounced as the, like the egg, the apple, the elephant. So when the is placed before a consonant letter, it is named and pronounced as the, like the morpho, the table, the monk, the prayer. So this is very easy concept how we have to pronounce the word letter the grammatically. Okay, let's move towards the next slide. The third stage of speech production is articulation, which is the execution of the articulatory score by the lungs, glottis, and larynx, tongue, lips, and jaws, and other parts of the vocal apparatus, resulting in speech. For right-handed people, the majority of speech production activity occurs in the left cerebral hemisphere. Hemispheres is basically a term
which can easily be understood. Suppose you have a ball in your hand. The ball is round in shape. So if you cut the ball into two equal pieces, one part will be named as left part and the other part will be named as right part. So it will be equally divided into two parts. So the left part of the ball will be termed as left hemisphere and the right part of the ball will be termed as right hemisphere. Here this is basically the structure of brain, cerebral hemispheres, and the brain is basically cut into two equal parts. One is on the left side and the other second one is on the right side. So this is basically right hemisphere and this is left hemisphere, and hemisphere are two equal parts cut together from a round shaped object. So the point to remember is that for right-handed people, the majority of speech production activity occurs in the left cerebral hemisphere here. Okay.
Models of speech production. Here we are going to discuss the models of speech production. The utterance generator model. It was, you know, it was discussed publicly in 1971. The utterance generator model was proposed by Fromkin in 1971. It's composed of 6 stages and was an attempt to account for the previous findings of speech error research. The stages of the utterance generator model were based on possible changes in representations of a particular utterance. It's composed of 6 stages and was an attempt to account for the previous findings of speech and error research. The stages of the utterance generator model were based on the possible changes in representation of a particular utterance. The first stage is where a person generates the meaning they wish to convey. Yes, this is first stage. The second stage involves the message being translated onto a syntactic structure. Here the message is given an outline. The third stage proposed by Fromkin is where and when the message gains different stresses and intonations based on the meaning. Intonations are basically the rise and fall of the voice we are going to create while we are speaking to our listeners. We are talking to our listeners. The fourth stage Fromkin suggested is concerned with the skeleton of the words from the lexicon. After the words have been selected in stage 4, the messages undergo phonological specification. The fifth stage applies rules of pronunciation and produces syllables that are to be outputted. The sixth and final stage of Fromkin's utterance generator model is the coordination of the motor commands necessary for the speech. Here, phonetic features of the message are sent to the relevant muscles of the vocal tract so that the intended message can be produced. Despite the ingenuity of the Fromkin's model, researchers have criticized this interpretation of the speech production. Although the utterance generator model accounts for many nuances and data found by speech error studies, researchers decided it still had room to be improved. The second model is basically the Garrett model, and it was offered in 1975. A more recent than Fromkin's attempt to explain speech production was published by Garrett in 1975. Garrett also created this model by compiling speech error data. There are many overlaps between this model and is the Fromkin's model from which it was based. But he added a few things to the Fromkin's model that filled some of the gaps being pointed out by other researchers.
The Garrett Fromkin models both distinguish between the levels, a conceptual level and sentence level and a motor level. These three levels are common to contemporary understanding of speech production. Dell's model, it was offered in 1994. In 1994, Dell proposed a model of the lexical network that became fundamental in the understanding of the very way speech is produced. This model of the lexical network attempts to symbolically represent the lexicon and in turn explains how people choose the words they wish to produce and how those words are to be organized into speech. Dell's model was composed of three stages: semantics, words, and phonemes. Phonemes is basically the unit how vowels and consonants sound. The words in the highest stage of the model represent the semantic category, and the image, the words representing semantic category are winter, footwear, feet, and snow represent the semantic categories of boot and skate. The second level represents the words that are referred to the semantic category in the image, boot, and skate, and the third level represent the phonemes, syllabic information including onset, vowels, and codas. Libel's model in 1999. Levelt further refined the lexical network proposed by Dell. Through the use of speech error data, Levelt recreated the three levels in Dell's model. The conceptual stratum, the top and the most abstract level, contains information a person has about ideas of a particular concept. The conceptual stratum also contains ideas about how concepts relate to each other. Levert Model 1999. Levert further refined the lexical network proposed by Dell. Through the use of speech error data, Levert recreated the three levels in Dell's model. The conceptual stratum, the top and most abstract level, contains information a person has about ideas of particular concepts. The conceptual stratum also contains ideas about how concepts relate to each other. This is where word selection would occur. A person would choose which word they wish to express. The next or middle level, the lemma stratum, contains information about the syntactic function of those individual words, including tense and function. This level functions to maintain syntax and place words correctly into sentences structure that makes sense to the speaker. The lowest and the final level in the form stratum, which similarly to the Dell model contains syllabic information. From here, the information stored at the form stratum level is sent to the motor cortex, where the vocal apparatus are coordinated to physically produce speech sounds. Speech production is complex and intricate process that allows humans to communicate through spoken language. It involves coordination of various anatomical structures and neurological processes to produce intelligible sounds and convey meanings. The process of speech production begins with the generation of linguistic message in the brain's language centers. This message contains the intended content that the speaker wishes to convey. Next, the brain sends signals to the motor cortex, which initiates the sequence of movements required for the speech. This production of the speech sounds relies on the manipulation of the airflow through the vocal tract. Vocal tract consists of the larynx, pharynx, oral cavity, and nasal cavity. As air is expelled from the lungs, the vocal cords in the larynx may vibrate to produce voiced sounds, or they may remain open to produce voiceless sounds. Articulation plays a crucial role in shaping the word's speech sounds.
The position of and movements of the tongue, lips, teeth, and other speech organs modify the airflow, resulting in different sounds. These movements are incredibly rapid and precise, allowing for the production of a vast array of phonemes that form the basis of language. Crucially, speech production also involves feedback mechanisms. As a person speaks, they receive auditory feedback, allowing them to monitor and adjust their speech in real time. Their feedback loop helps ensure that the intended message is conveyed accurately. And in conclusion, speech production is a remarkable feat of coordination between the brain, motor system, and speech organs. It involves the generation of a linguistic message, the precise coordination of articulatory movements, and constant feedbacking to ensure effective communication. The diversity and complexity of the world's language are a testament to the incredible capabilities of human speech production. So this was end of my lecture. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Goodbye.